Welcome back to Jolie's, where you can get yourself some spicy sausage, some roasted nuts, and, well, not the freshest React content today, but some solid React content today from the tube. YouTube, that is. We are finishing up our series on the fall of the Aztecs by DJ Peach Cobbler. So let's get right into it. 3, 2, 1, boop.
That sex work is real work, and I'm not a human trafficker, I'm a job creator. But this is not the story of how I'm going to get away with it. This is the story.
And you do it again.
De Sahagún.
Oh,
Diaz wrote for glory, Cortez wrote for gold, and Las Casas wrote for God. But Bernardino de Sahagún, why did he write? He certainly needed a good answer, because in 16th century New Spain, what he was writing was very suspicious indeed. But in order to understand the significance of what he was writing, you must first understand the slapstick misadventures that were Spanish attempts to convert the natives, as well as what a codex was. A codex.
Ooh, I've been wondering, that's one of those words that I will just use in everyday parlance, not knowing anything about what I'm actually saying.
Was a Mesoamerican book of pictures, not exactly a written language, but interestingly could be considered a step on the way to having one. They were sort of proto-hieroglyphics, which abided by certain rules. These pictures were core to how the Aztecs settled legal disputes. So why do you believe your altepetl should extend to the river and not stop at the big rock? Well, if you will refer to my chart here, but these images were more than just for legal arguments. They were how the people of Mesoamerica recorded their history as well. And boy, let me tell ya, those books made great firewood. The codices written before the arrival of the Spanish.
I mean, you just don't know what you got till it's gone. Like that's just history right there. Just some of the best stuff that we could have ever hoped for, or like the complete picture. Studying history essentially is like trying to complete a puzzle that has pieces missing from the box, swaths of pieces missing, entire portions of the images, sometimes just a little bit here, sometimes just a little bit there. But that puzzle was ultimately would combine to create an equation that would make you understand almost everything. And thus you are left with variables that you have sometimes no concept that there is supposed to be a variable. You could be missing a complete portion of the equation.
Were burned first by the Tlaxcalteca when they burned the library.
Though we do have to admit, like, it seems like the people of like the indigenous people of the Americas, the greater Americas, were kind of doing it to each other before we got there. Well, the Spanish got there. I'm not Spanish at all, but to the best of my knowledge.
Of Texcoco, despite them being allies.
Though if any phrenologists are out there, based on the last video, I'm more than willing to let you measure my head to tell me my, heritage. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate y'all joining me for this 3-part series, this trilogy. This is the closest thing to watching Lord of the Rings since I was a teenager. If you're enjoying this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, use that share button to send this video to somebody who you think doesn't know enough about the fall of the Aztecs. Let's get back to the show, and thank you so much for joining me.
By that point, then later by Christian missionaries of the Franciscan order in mass book burnings. The Franciscan friars who were responsible.
I'm so disappointed with the Catholic Church on this. I'm so disappointed with the Catholic Church of, 500 years ago. But guys, for how much y'all purport to be so historically minded, culturally minded, the total lack of respect towards this new culture that they found is almost perplexing. But obviously they had other motives going into this in terms of, what they wanted to do with the land and the resources and how they wanted to convert the people. But I feel like, obviously you'd think the Catholic Church of today would, preserve, and while still trying to convert, they would still preserve. Why couldn't they have done with the Americas, what they did with the like Northern Europeans, like the Scandinavians and like the Norse. Oh, guys, just so y'all know, I'm enjoying myself a cerveza, a Mexican style beer for this last hurrah. Well, this isn't going to be the last Aztec video we watch or the last video about the Americas during colonialism. But this is the finale of this series, so I thought I'd celebrate by specifically picking up a cerveza style beer to watch with. But to go back to my point, it's just disappointing, and obviously probably the Catholic Church. I always have this idea about creativity, being a game designer. Sometimes you have an idea, and when you have the idea, when it first comes to you, it's like molten clay or like a putty, and you can form it and shape it really quickly and rapidly and add to it and subtract from it and smooth it out. But the longer that you work on something, the more it cools down and the stiffer it becomes and the harder it is to make massive changes. So maybe it's just that the Catholic Church got to like those Northern European Norse people, like like Viking-esque people, and it's true for Britain as well, just what we would commonly call Druidic or pagan, and incorporated their religious beliefs into the Catholic Church's beliefs, like integrated, synthesized something, very creative and creating kind of like a more true world religion. The East meets the West in a lot of ways. But obviously they didn't do that with the native indigenous Americans and their belief systems, and it might just be because it was too cooked up already, or there was the sea between everybody, between Europe and America, made it to where they didn't need to blend things together. They didn't need, they felt like since there was that much of a gap, there wasn't like they weren't neighbors necessarily, that they could just go for a total war approach to their culture and philosophy. I don't know, maybe we'll get into it, but very disappointed in the Catholic Church for just straight up erasing these people's histories. But remember, they're like you said, the Tobal people also did that.
For the conversion of natives after conquest would destroy temples, codices, and idols, as well as do mass baptisms and their initial attempts at native conversion. These methods were, "Thanks for the bath. That was really refreshing." "What? That wasn't a bath. You love Jesus now." "Who?" The city of Texcoco had its temple raided by Franciscan friars 4 years after the conquest, and the friars found to their shock that the statues of Christ and the Virgin Mary which had been given to the city had been placed alongside the old gods and worshipped as another part of their pantheon. It had become clear that the natives did not understand what Christianity was, and mass baptisms were mere political theater. So how do you break through the cult?
I mean, if you were presented Christianity whole cloth as an adult person, it would be a wild story to wrap your mind around. It's one thing for, like, I'd like to think that even the most diehard or committed atheists and agnostics in this country today still know a generalness about Christianity, so that way if they walked into a church, they would, they wouldn't be completely lost if they, wanted to find God and salvation and, profess that Christ is truly king. They would be able to walk in and meet them halfway. But just the idea of out of nowhere, you're being presented with a whole new, for lack of a better word, mythology, lore to the world and why it is the way it is, a whole new message, a gospel. I mean, you can't blame these. I mean, if I was, and here's the cancellation portion of this video brought to you by Jolie's. If I was trying to get a nation of people, of new people, in line with my ideology, I would consider the adults completely awash. I mean, we'd probably present it to them, but I wouldn't expect them to actually click with it at all. They're already baked in. I mean, I'm not saying anything new here. I would focus on the kids. the kids could like be completely indoctrinated in that first generation. If you get that first generation indoctrinated, for the most part, you're probably going to be okay. The machine will sort of run itself. Now, what do you do with the adults? Well, that's the adult question, I guess.
Cultural barrier and ensure the natives are properly Christian. That's right. Mass baptisms were followed by a few inquisitions, mostly aimed at native leaders, but these were severely lacking in political support. Bernardino de Sahagún, a friar of the Franciscan order, arrived in Spain in 1529 at the age of 30. 8 years after the fall of the Aztec Empire. While in New Spain, he quickly developed a fondness for the Nahuatl language of the now conquered peoples. As a man with a big boner for Jesus and language, Sahagún would be tasked
Many such cases. Him and Tolkien would probably have gotten along quite well.
with learning about and documenting Aztec religion so as to finally figure out how to root it out completely. But while compiling and translating the writings and illustrations of Nahua people, Sahagún would end up assembling more of an encyclopedia of the Nahua people in a decidedly unconventional manner. I do believe Sahagún's work may qualify as one of the most unique books ever written. It was written in Nahuatl, with the Roman alphabet, but was also a story told in images like a pre-contact codex, and it was also assembled in the traditional order of a European-style encyclopedia, an order set by the Greek writer Pliny in classical antiquity, and it was under constant scrutiny. As the decades passed,
brother wrote like hot fire, just coming out, that the formality of it and the experimentation. This like feels like there's that book that often gets talked about as being like this weird oddity of history where it's written in a language that nobody knows, and it has some sort of encyclopedic perspective to it. I wish I had the term. Chat, commenters, viewers in the down there, and scroll down, leave it the name if you can remember it. I'm not going to look it up to distract from the video, but it has that same quality, what he's describing here as that, which it just sounds fascinating. Also, he kind of, in some ways, it looks like he, with this codex, it sounds very similar to comic books. It's or illustrated adventure, more of an illustrated storytelling style. So in some ways, these codex were almost more in line with our current method of consuming media. Or it was like more progressive in that situation. Man, this sounds like a beautiful piece. I hope that I can get a hold of one. This actually might become a goal of mine, is to get a hold of a copy of this book, a reproduction or something like that. Not like an OG, not like a first edition or anything like that, but just a modern reprinting.
Sahagún's colleagues would call his work a waste of money. They would call it idolatrous, and they would even have his manuscripts confiscated and sent around and inspected by his peers, bringing his work to a standstill for years.
Okay, I want to say this. This is like a personal tangent, but if you believe that your work has worth and value to it, do not listen to the people who downplay you, who mock, who don't see it. That's I would suggest that possibly the first 15 years or so of my adult life as a creative person was shaped by my inability to move past other people's thoughts and criticisms. I would gleefully be like, please give me approval, I'm going to tell you my ideas, and then I would get like shrugs. I would get criticism, people who didn't see the possibility, and it would deflate me. It took me a long time to develop leathery skin, if you will, to harden up enough to withstand those slings and arrows, those criticisms. But they don't see it. If you're a young person, you're creative, or you're wanting to do a project of value that you see value in, those other people out there, they're not going to see it from your perspective. They're not going to have that. They don't have that core fire that's burning it. Even if you describe it to them, all they're going to see is like I prefer, using the fire analogy. All they're going to see is the the driftwood that you're going to use to keep the fire aflame. And then they're not going to understand like the purpose. They're not going to see like the forge that you're building in order to create something bigger and better. And that goes for more than just, it expands past creativity. We'll get into that maybe in this video, but probably sometime later. But ultimately, be careful about taking other people's opinions, especially when it comes to opportunities. Follow your gut. Or do thorough research. Don't let like one person talk you out of a good idea.
He was even ordered to dismiss his scribes and begin working alone, despite his now old age and trembling hand. But thankfully for Sahagún, as his work began receiving more scrutiny and doubt from the Franciscan order, the commissary general, Friar Rodrigo de Sequeira, whatever, go fuck yourself, was always on Sahagún's side.
Pronunciation, people out there, you're fascists. If you're strict about pronunciation, you're fash. That's my, and spelling too. If you think, I'm get very upset when people correct my spelling, but they don't actually address my ideas. It's always been a pet peeve of mine, especially because I'm a bad speller. I'm a creative speller. Damn it! I hear the word. Yeah, you gotta give me credit. I hear a word, and I like break it up in my brain and figure out how I want to spell it, how I think it could be spelled. If anything, I'm daring. Fuck you.
And fighting to let him continue his work. But in 1577, something happened that even Sakura couldn't prevent. Sahagún's greatest fear had come true. The crown demanded his manuscript for inspection, and no copies were allowed to remain. His life's work had to be sent across the world's second largest ocean in the hands of a stranger, so that another stranger could take one look at it and burn it as heresy. Oh yeah, at this point, King Philip II was actually the king of Spain, but I'm going to keep using Charles V's head because I like looking at his face. Regardless, we can see here that policy has changed, as the crown's decree extended to...
All right, I'm one of my goals, read all the important text. We order that as soon as you receive this, our decree with great care and diligence, you take measure to get these books without their remaining the originals or copies of them, and send them well guarded at once to our consul of the Indies, that they may there be examined, and you will be advised not to permit anyone for any reason in any language to write concerning the superstitions and way of life of these Indians had. Okay.
All accounts of the native way of life before Spanish arrival. Where the policy was once erasure and then became understanding, it appears that it had circled back around to erasure once more. Bernardino would claim that he did send a manuscript, but it was lost on the way. Regardless of whether or not Bernardino was lying, we do know one thing. He did make copies, as his work continued against the crown's law. You know I'm on your side, Bernardino. I've always been on your side.
I mean, obviously, I'm not sure about, creating manuscripts back in the 1533s, but from what I understand and how I write things, and I'm not even the most organized or well, disciplined writer out there, but if you were to take my latest draft of what I've been writing and burn it, or delete it. You go and find my latest draft and delete it. I would at least have other copies of earlier drafts in order to reference, in order to create another one. So, I mean, it just seems to me like, yeah, you can take the most current manuscript, but he probably has so many notes and so much organization that he's already done that he could potentially recreate it if necessary. Granted, he's an old man and it's a lot of handwriting.
But this codex, it's how does a doctor cure a disease? Oh, the doctor analogy again. He must understand the disease before he can do anything else. How can we root out the religion of these people if we don't understand it? You're not studying their religion, you're recording their entire history. Anyone can see that. Well, I did want to preserve their language as well. I have a great fondness for it. You were directed to learn their religion, not document their entire history. Why are you doing this? Because no one else will. The writings of the Greeks and Romans connect us to our past, pagan and idolatrous it may
100%.
be. These people deserve the same. They deserve better than you were to send your manuscript to the crown so they can just...
Yeah, imagine like if Christianity had gone out of its way to burn the Greek and Roman gods and those Norse gods I mentioned earlier. It's just... It obviously the Spanish specifically, and I mean, you know, we'd have a lot to talk about here if if there was like an opposing, or if the British or French, like I guess those would be the two most likely. Italians, I don't think Italians were looking to were in a great spot at the time, but if they were also in this part of America and also developing a relationship, and doing their own thing, I really think that would have probably also helped this entire part of history to be more just, because as he said in the first video, the Spanish were basically in bloodlust mode due to the having to fight off the Muslims and the Spanish Inquisition. As he said, I'm not excusing whatever happened there. It was obviously a very heated, it was a heated gamer moment, if you will, for both sides. And then they got that fanatical and then took that to America. But still, it's like, yeah, I think like all of these cultures would be better suited. It's like even if I personally think that Christianity might be potentially the right answer for the question of how to act and how to set your morals and how to that foundation that we all need. It also is good to have that at the very least like the ghost of your ancestors around, and acknowledge it and be able to pull from that as well for indigenous Americans, for Mexican Americans who, obviously have a lineage back to these stories. I think it's better for them to exist, even if they're considered more mythic than what you're replacing it with. And even for me, I kind of consider most of Christianity in the Bible to be in a mythic tradition more than historic or truth.
Sure, it's free of idolatry. It was lost in transit. I'm sure I sent it, and I'll send another copy as soon as I can. No copies were to remain, Bernardino. Why are you being so combative? You have faithfully served this order for half a century now. Why, in your old age, are you so difficult? There are things in the book which trouble me. Things about Cortez, things about Montezuma, things about us, what we said, how we acted, and even how we remained. They'll burn it. I am sure that Sodom and Gomorrah would have loved to tell their side of the story too. You can twist scripture however you wish. I know what's wrong. And what happened when Lot's wife looked back at Sodom? You shoulder too much. This isn't the time. Let someone else tell their story, Bernardino. That is not the task you were given. It's not what we're doing here. Who else can tell their story? They're going to be extinct before long. You can see that too. I know you can. I buried 10,000 bodies myself. The plagues tear through them, one after the other. This isn't a negotiation. I'm taking your book to Spain, and maybe they'll let me return with it. Don't. I told you I'm taking it. No, I mean, don't return with it. What? If you must take it, then take it somewhere else. Somewhere it will be safe. I beg of you, don't let them burn it. I don't have a choice. Then bury it. Bury it somewhere it won't be found. Someone, someday, should know these people as I have known them. Bernardino's work.
Well, amazing. I just want to compliment DJ Peach Cobbler. I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. He is, and I hope he gets back to this style. I've seen some of his most recent videos. I reacted to one just recently. If you go back one video, from here. Reacted to one of his most recent videos. But this style that he has, like these 3D environments with the eyes moving, the most important part, his voice acting. I really hope he gets back to that. I understand if he's kind of like in a transitionary period in his life, but that scene was the work, and it was well worth it. It really was. It sold you, dude. You're amazing. I just want to say that PJ Peach Cobbler, for all any sort of gruff I give you, I think your work is inspiring. I really hope to someday, touch nearly the quality that you do with my own original content. Just putting that out there, brother.
Work would end up in the library of the ruling family of Florence, Italy, where it would remain unnoticed by the world for centuries. It would be called the Florentine Codex, and it existed against the will of the Spanish Empire. There's lots of fun little things in the Florentine Codex that the Spanish Empire would not have wanted to be known, but most of it is, frankly, just embarrassing for them. For example, at one point during the siege of Tenochtitlan, the Spanish began to construct a huge catapult, but it malfunctioned.
A catapult? I thought we knew about trebuchets at this point. What a stinker to bring a catapult out to that battle.
Of course, Cortés managed to play this off as an act of mercy to the clueless natives. At least that's what he said in his letters to the king. Of course, that doesn't actually make any sense, and in the Florentine Codex, we see the actual native perspective on the failed catapult. The natives watched the Spanish construct this weird device they probably didn't understand at first, but I think they figured it out by the time they saw the Spanish pointing and gesturing towards a location filled with commeters, and of course that big rock was probably not for decoration. However, when the device was activated, the rock dropped straight down, and the catapult itself just sort of rocked back and forth harmlessly. Then all the Spanish began yelling and pointing fingers at one another. But the most important parts of the Florentine Codex lie between the lines. Now, once again for clarification, Nahua is the ethnic group the Aztecs belonged to, but there were lots of Nahua cities. The Codex contains 3 distinct parts: a Nahuatl portion written by Christianized Nahuas who Sahagun worked with, the images themselves, which were illustrated by Nahuas, and a Spanish translation of the Nahuatl text, which was written by Sahagun himself. As you could imagine, there are many things that Sahagun decided to not translate. Lots of little things that the Spanish Empire just would not like. Things like where the Nahuatl portion calls the conquistadors greedy monkeys with a piggish hunger, Sahagun just translates that to basically, they were happy when they got gold. The Florentine Codex whispers more than it says. The images contained within, for example, lose their pigment as the book progresses, showing the pressure and time constraints Bernardino Sahagun was under. But there's one thing of particular note to us. Between the funny stories and translation fuckery and running out of crayons, Montezuma...
I mean, like, that is like one of those, like, interesting, like, well, what is the term? When the limitations of the art actually enhance the art, the idea of, like, as this thing goes forward, as we get closer to the extinction of this culture for, maybe, I think people would say that, like historians, losing its color, like going to black and white. That's like, you would do that in a movie about the fall of the Aztecs. If you were making a movie, you would like start it in color, vibrant, wonderful, and then as things got worse and worse, you would slowly suck the color out until the the audience doesn't even notice in the last like 15 minutes, the climax of the movie, the third act is like completely in black and white, and it's like happened so slowly that they just did not completely clock it until like one specific moment. So beautiful, happy accent, sad accent, obviously, but you understand what I'm saying.
Does not die in the Florentine Codex. I mean, he's alive in one part and dead in the next, but he doesn't die, he just stops living.
Yes, that's what dying means.
No, I mean without cause, without injury. The great speaker of the Aztec Empire ceases to exist. The Florentine Codex devotes an entire page to the funny catapult fuck-up, and not a single word on how Montezuma died. The Florentine Codex tells a story in the places it says nothing at all, a product of an incompetent empire and a dying people, a smoking mirror that twists in places and reflects faithfully in the next. In the spaces between the lines, whispers half a millennium old build and build to the roaring crescendo. Diaz wrote for glory, Cortez for gold, Las Casas for God, and Bernardino wrote with a trembling hand.
For history. Okay.
Growing up in American public school during the 2000s, between our cheeseburger breaks and 9/11 orgies, I was told that the Spanish beat the Aztecs with superior technology and some bacterial allies. Now I know you're shocked, but it turns out that's bullshit. On a long and
What? Well, I did think that the plague was the plagues were like one of the biggest contributing factors to the majority of the death that happened. But I guess I could be wrong, and we're about to find out together.
enough time scale. Was the defeat of the Aztecs by the Spanish a sure thing? Absolutely, but we're not on a long time scale. And this is not a war between the Aztecs and Spain. This is a war between the Aztec and several hundred Spanish investors, and it lasted 2 years. As I've worked on this project, I've learned that schools in other nations tell another totally distinct but actually much more compelling lie, that the Aztecs were cruel despots who were overthrown largely by their angry subjects, and the Spanish helped because they were good guys. As far as lies go, this one is actually on the same hemisphere as the truth, but just because the constellations look right and the toilet flushes the correct way does not mean you're in Australia. Look up and see the penguins. This video is about the tensions of empire and how they unwind. Tensions between empires and their allies, tensions between empires and their actions, tensions between subject and ruler and history. So, let's watch the tensions rise. Cortez, after several days in Tenochtitlan, sent his translators to Montezuma so as to ask to visit the Aztecs' main temple, a massive pyramid in the center of the city, now called the Templo Mayor. Montezuma would not only let them visit, he'd even greet them at the top. I hope the climb didn't exhaust you, Spaniard. It is a great temple, is it not? Oh, our people don't get tired? Actually, we're superhuman. You're so full of shit. I should sell you to the guys that make leather. I'd make a fortune. What? I said, gaze upon my city. Its grand plazas and markets, its verdant gardens, its proud people, and their...
I wonder where he got this imagery from. Just a side note. It's like, it feels like the kind of stuff that you would need, like, AI to produce, but not to say obviously, this was only a year ago, so it's not like he couldn't have used AI to do it, but I doubt that. I did based on what I know about DJ Peach Cobbler. So yeah, I'm just wondering where he got these clips from. I mean, I wouldn't be half surprised if he made them himself based on everything else he's made.
Great works. It is beautiful, particularly from up here. There's a reason we build our temples high, Spaniard, so our gods can look out and see how we appreciate their gifts. Come inside with me, and I will show you how we thank them. All right, let's address the human sacrifice in the room. He's starting to smell. If you will look up Bernal Diaz's historical account, which first got me into this hellfuck nightmare story, and Control F the word sacrifice, you will get 116 results. It's a point driven home by the Spanish like they were a good friend, and the point had far too much to drink that night. Don't drink and drive, kids. You gotta wait till you're an adult to do that. Can we trust Spanish accounts on human sacrifice?
No.
Their justification for the war was specifically to accomplish the goal of stopping human sacrifice.
I mean, granted, that's like, our government maybe using propaganda about, things that are going on in the Middle East, maybe Iraq, amongst the, royal family of Iraq, if you will, in order to make us feel less bad about all the bombs and troops and killing that happened.
It was central to the moral and political justification for their war with the Aztec, and seeing as the expedition desperately needed a good justification, as they were acting without legal authority, they naturally play it up as much as humanly possible. One point Diaz in particular discusses was a massive human skull rack right in the center of Tenochtitlan. According to Diaz, there was a supposedly incalculable number of skulls upon the rack. And when Matthew Restall wrote When Montezuma Met Cortez, archaeological findings showed there were only a few dozen. I guess Diaz was bad at counting, huh? Unfortunately for Restall, the archaeologists kept digging. They have now unearthed hundreds of skulls, including those of several children and many women. Matthew Restall's argument largely rested upon archaeological findings, or rather, the lack of them. But the gap between Spanish accounts and archaeological digs is getting more narrow over time. That gap will never disappear. The Spanish cannot be trusted on this matter, but still, it happened a lot.
Judging from the size of the rack itself, it could theoretically hold up to 12,000 skulls. But whether or not it actually contained that many is a topic of much debate, as archaeology can for the most part just show things that have happened, and cannot conclusively prove that something did not happen. This is also ignoring the simple fact that not every skull may have been destined for the rack. A lack of archaeological evidence is not in and of itself evidence that something didn't happen. In much the same way that a man accused of murder by an eyewitness is not exonerated by a lack of skulls decorating the alleged murderer's mantle.
Alright, so we can't trust modern experts, and we can't trust the Spanish. I know. Let's use the Florentine Codex. That'll be a great source. In Book 2 of the Codex, here are the things listed.
Children being sacrificed to the god of rain.
What?
The more they cried, the more rain would come.
Oh,
Skinning
no.
men alive and wearing their skin.
No.
Giving a young man a decadent life of luxury for a year.
Oh, no.
Then killing him at the end of that same year.
Alright, that's enough. There's a lot more, but damn, that's...
I mean, I just want to see the horrors. I'm here for the horrors. So we could have kept going, DJ, and I'm sure we'll get there. But Jesus Christ Almighty, that is a lot of reasons and like methods and formalities to sacrifice. Like, I didn't realize that there was such that was a thing. It's like, for me, I thought sacrifice was just go to war with just some small tribe nearby, get all the men, maybe a few women, and just take them, bring them into the town and just cut out their hearts. Like, the fact that there's multiple methods and like rituals around human sacrifice is very, very disheartening, very disconcerting. It's like, it's one thing if there's like one way of doing it and we do it that way, but it's another way if you've gotten into a point where you're like doing nuance. I don't know exactly how to explain this, but it's weird. Like, when you have, like, I guess the way I would think about it is like when you have a way of having a crazy sex orgy that is like, that kind of tells me like you like having crazy sex orgies. If you have multiple ways of having crazy sex orgies, that tells me you think these crazy sex orgies are actually going to make you live forever.
pretty fucked up, huh?
Did you notice something about that portion of the Florentine Codex?
What? Of course not. I hate noticing things.
While the Florentine Codex was written in Nahuatl, then translated to Spanish by Sahagún, there is no Nahuatl text for a significant amount of these descriptions of sacrifices, including what you just uncritically read. Therefore, it is totally possible that it's complete invention. I understand you wish for a perfect source that objectively communicates the religious practices of the Aztec, but such a source not only doesn't exist, it quite simply cannot exist. Perhaps this alone is worth thinking about. How the actual religious practices of the Aztec were and are still to this day, subservient to the political motivations of the person describing them.
Let's cut through the worthless flesh of this whole thing and get to the beating heart at the center of this matter. Cortez and Diaz would both claim that they entered Tenochtitlan to stop Aztec cruelty, as the people they encountered were forced into this tribute system.
I mean, I'm sure he's going to lay it out at his best estimation of the sacrificial thing. I will say that I don't think you would have this many sources committing to human sacrifice as occurring if it didn't occur. I think that they might have elaborated upon it and made it, obviously worse than it. I mean, I don't know how a human sacrifice could be worse than it is if it happens. They might have made it seem like it was more flagrant. But if they all are saying that human sacrifices are going on, I at least believe that basic truth that they are, like, this is something in their culture where that is being communicated to them and to being communicated to the Spanish by the indigenous people, the Native American, the Aztec.
And hated the Aztecs for their cruelty and greed. This, in combination with the monstrous human sacrifice which occurred, is a common talking point for people claiming the Spanish were liberators rather than oppressors. I was unaware it was so profitable to be a liberator.
Help, I'm stuck!
But regardless, in the Cortez and Diaz accounts, I have no doubt that there is a great deal of truth to that. I, in fact, would be absolutely shocked if the Spanish were not greeted enthusiastically by many Mesoamericans who detested Aztec dominance. Many of these city-states were forced to supply tribute to the Aztec after losing wars to them. I'd fucking hate them too. Listen, I visit a lot of playgrounds, and let me tell you from experience. If you're looking for kids on the playground who are sick of giving the biggest kid on the playground money, Lord knows you're gonna find a lot of them. And they will be firm allies of yours when you beat up the bully and take his place so that you can get all the lunch money from now on. But of course, that bully does have friends. Friends that benefit from the lunch money kickbacks and protection the bully provides. And maybe there's some marriage alliances too. I don't know, the metaphor's breaking down. Regardless, you'd find a lot of allies. First, from outright victims of the bully, then later, when you start singling out and beating up that bully's friends when he's not around.
The Aztec let it be known that they were offering a year's tribute relief to all who refrained from going over to the Spanish, implicitly reminding everyone that they were the leaders who were there to stay, and that they wouldn't forget who their friends and enemies were after these interlopers were forced to withdraw. But that was a distant reward compared to the immediate threat of having mounted lancers ride through town, burning and killing with impunity. Meanwhile, the Spaniards also offered to reward those who came over to them. They see, wrote Cortez in the midst of these events, how those who do so are well received and favored by me, whereas those who do not are destroyed daily.
Oh wow, what a great liberator. The Spanish would call the propaganda surrounding their empire the Black Legend. The lies of mostly Protestants intended to attack the Catholic Church and Spain's great empire, of which they were just jealous. They were just jealous. While I understand you're expecting me to call this bullshit, the fact is there is a great deal of merit to the idea that Spanish conduct in the New World was used as propaganda by their adversaries, and exaggerations were a part of that. Other European nations desiring a slice of the American pie would absolutely use Spanish atrocities to justify their own atrocities. While I do believe Bartolomé de las Casas was a great man and a much, much more reliable source than the non-stop lie factory that was Hernán Cortés, it's no coincidence his work was first translated into English and spread during the Spanish-American War. If the Aztec were monstrous, Spain was always justified. And if Spain was monstrous, then competing powers telling them to eat a dick with all of their territorial claims was justified. My big problem with Black Legend proponents, and make no mistake, many do still exist, is that they fail to understand that Spain had its own Black Legend about the Aztec. The Black Legend is standard procedure for political entities with imperial ambitions. Spain is not exceptional in this regard. Every empire that has ever existed gets this treatment, including...
Watch the latest season of Andor, one of the best shows ever made. But specifically, if you're a Star Wars aficionado, like it's, chicken soup for the soul for a Star Wars fan. in the development of the Black Legend, like in seeing it in quasi real time in a fictional setting.
The Aztec Black Legend, like all Black Legends, aims to morally discredit them, and therefore their achievements. You cannot just conquer. You must make it clear after the conquest that it was morally necessary. The Aztec Black Legend rests upon two pillars, one of which is human sacrifice, and the other is how quickly the Spanish found allies upon their arrival. As far as the sacrifices...
That is very interesting. I mean, how quickly... I try to think, like, if there was like an alien insurrection, like a people... I might not be able to go down this rabbit hole, but how quickly and how divided would America be if aliens came to America, came to the world, but let's specifically narrow it down to America, and started to try to pick us apart? Like, how quickly would America be divided into subdivisions of political interest and different cultures and people who feel that they're separate from America as a whole, who would rather work with the aliens? So I guess that's like what it feels like, this outside force comes in, and then all of a sudden, like, peoples who might have identified themselves as being part of this greater collective, see an opportunity to, subdivide and potentially, take on the hierarchy, the people higher in the hierarchy for their own gain. I don't know. That's just something I'm thinking about here in terms of, like, what would it look like if it happened today?
Concerned, many Spanish accounts can be dismissed out of hand, but it did occur, and it occurred a lot. The second pillar, however, is the most dangerous sort of lie imaginable. The sort of lie that isn't a lie at all. It's true.
Well,
until you look deeper.
Okay.
Aztec human sacrifice was many things, but it was, as far as we're concerned today, a political tool.
There were some smoking braziers of their incense, in which they were burning the hearts of 3 Indians whom they had sacrificed that day, and all the walls of that shrine were so splashed and caked with blood that they and the floor too were black. Indeed, the whole place stank abominably.
So, what do you think?
Oh, God.
So I have a few notes. Sure, I think if you put maybe a TV by the burning flesh braziers, okay, I'll think about it. I mean, the thing is, I feel like that would mess with the flow of chi from the blood fountain, but okay, go on. Maybe
what?
Like a potted plant, a succulent, or something low maintenance like that. Over by that, what's that statue with the big toothy grin? Oh, that's the
something that I'm remembering right now is the last podcast on the left, I think, covered a serial killer / cult that was, very inspired by, like, let's just say reconnecting with their roots. It was I think a Mexican cult. And they performed blood magic and human sacrifices in order to, get the benefits of blood magic and human sacrifices. And the smell was the thing that I think they kept coming back to, like the idea of, like, the smell of decomposition is constantly haunting them. And, the thing they couldn't keep out, couldn't keep away from outsiders picking up on.
Flayed Lord. Flayed? Like you worship a guy with no skin? Well, I mean, he skins his enemies, and, like, he wears that.
Oh, wow.
Cool. So would it be alright if I put a, like a little chapel in here? Like a little church,
What?
For Montezuma's part, he would allow the Spanish to build a small place of worship in their own quarters while refusing the construction of one, specifically in the Temple Mayor. Old Monty would even go so far as to supply materials and craftsmen for the purpose.
Oh,
Polytheistic religions have this sort of built-in tolerance, which is why they're not around anymore. Montezuma didn't give a shit who the Spanish worshipped. Montezuma's gods were treating him well, the sun was shining, and that's all he wanted.
It was a wholesome time. You know, Montezuma probably knew this more than any of us today. You don't know when you're in the good times until after you're out of the good times. You can't have a golden era unless the era that comes after sucks. And everybody looks back and thinks, oh, that was the golden era. And us as Americans, you sitting on the other side of this screen, we know this because we went through the golden era. If you're anywhere near my age, we went through the golden era of television and came out the other end with fucking Netflix shows and Disney Plus and all these subscription services putting out dribble. There's been like, let's talk in the comments. How many good movies and shows have come out of these? I, as of right now, count like I said, Andor is like the only thing that comes to my mind instantly as being a good show. And I need to watch it to the end. I still have the last story arc to get through as of recording this, so it could fumble at the end. It's not an Andor show. This isn't an Andor episode, but I just want to say the first story arc of season 2 probably could have been cut out. It was exciting. There was some cool stuff there, but at the end of the day, I don't think it was not nearly as consequential as the Gorman arc that was like arcs 2 and 3. That was the meat. Most specifically on Andor season 2 is like they could have cut out like the entire second episode practically, in my opinion. But we can get more into that when I do an Andor reaction or retrospective.
The construction of the Spanish place of worship, we must come to our fourth knot, the capture knot. Its threads are long because
I forgot about the knot.
The meeting had planted a seed. Or rather, the lie of the meeting had planted a seed that, just as one lie begets another, germinated into a sprawling tree of inventions and embellishments. The captains had reached Tenochtitlan hoping to do what conquistadors had done before and would continue to do in the Americas: seize the ruler, and by threats, selective acts of violence, and the performance of possession, make a conquest claim.
According to Diaz, while they were constructing their place of worship, the Spanish noticed something strange in their quarters. The room had a door which had been plastered over and painted, seemingly recently. The Spaniards, who, as I'm sure you've noticed by this point, were the worst fucking house guests, naturally opened it in secret, and
when they saw the quantity of golden objects, jewels and plates and ingots, which lay in that chamber, they were quite transported. They did not know what to think of such riches. The news soon spread to the other captains and soldiers.
No.
And very secretly, we all went in to see. The sight of all that wealth dumbfounded me. Being only a youth at the time and never having seen such riches before, I felt certain that there could not be a store like it in the world.
the Spanish closed the door, presumably once they were done orgasming, and covered it up again, making it appear the same way as when they found it. Weirdly enough, right after this happened, the conquistadors came to Cortez and told him just how dangerous their situation was. Montezuma, they said, was unreliable and could have them all killed at any moment, and their only hope, considering how insanely outnumbered they were, was to capture him and hold him hostage. They were, of course, correct that they were in a bad situation, but, you know, funny timing, and also, like, you could just leave. They didn't need to be there. It should be noted here that taking the native leader captive was the normal Spanish MO. So, Cortez, along with 5 or so of his men and his translators, visited Montezuma and took him captive. Which is pretty weird. Because this Looney Tunes situation that they established lasted for around 6 months, and the Spanish were wildly outnumbered, yet no one did shit.
This is because the very notion, like the surrender at the meeting, is pure nonsense, implausible in the extreme, unsupported by any of the evidence of life in Tenochtitlan during these months. If Montezuma was ever physically detained, whether in irons or under guard, it was after war broke out in the city center in May. In other words, it happened within weeks, if not days, of his death. But Cortés and others later moved the arrest forward in time. They admitted that Montezuma still ran his empire, but by inventing his capture they could claim that Cortés controlled Montezuma and thus controlled the empire. The story only hangs together if one accepts cartoonish stereotypes of Montezuma as naive and acquiescent, and Cortés as brilliantly and boldly Machiavellian.
Wow. Well, this is definitely getting pretty deep in terms of, like, you know, the what did happen, what was reported to happen, and, you know, trying to bridge that gap with educated guesses and research and things like that. But that is wild. How many hoops the Spanish and thus the Europeans, the Western Europeans, jumped through in order to justify this colonial takeover. You know, this is, look at this in current media landscape. I don't know what our politics are as a, you know, collective or in the individuals, but, you know, sometimes I'm very critical of groups that are doing shady shit and, you know, kind of things that will be marked down as evil. And I think just do it. You know, just, if you're going to be evil, just be evil and own it. But all throughout history, you always are trying to win the war of ideas as much as you're trying to win the actual war in front of you. It seems you have to justify your actions, even retroactively. You have to stop and think, what is the best way we can present what we did in order for us to seem righteous? Because if you were to talk to, it's just so funny, the nuances and the my favorite meme, the imbecile, the midwit, and the genius on the bell curve. And, like, it's like one of those things where the imbecile and the genius agree, and the midwit has, like, to overcomplicate it because, like, you know, the imbecile and the genius both, like, kind of see through the shit, if you will. There's a lot more to it, you know, depending on which iteration you're seeing. But what I'm feeling out right here is that you're always having to justify. You have to create a justification for your actions if it's, like, massively culturally significant that the midwits, who are the majority of the population for the most part, can chew on and justify. You got to give them enough protein, enough beef jerky, if you will, of ideas to chew on and to justify, like, what you did. And you have to sort, you know, and even back then they couldn't just walk in. Like, I feel like, so I think where I was going with this analogy initially was, if you had told me, you know, if you had asked me, like, how did the Spanish take over the Aztec, I would have been like, just pure force of will with no regard to them at all. But obviously that's not how humanity works. That's not how politics and humanity works. So they had to, you know, kind of play the game, but the game ultimately ended in the same way. So my dumb idea of how this all worked was they just went in and brute forced it. And then this all is, like, kind of like, this is all the midwittery of justification. But then when it comes back down to it, to the genius side, it is just brute force. You know, it goes back to that. It's just brute force with extra steps and layers. But yeah, they ultimately were going to bully them over, and they did it for stuff, for material things, not for spiritual reasons. It does not seem. The spiritual reasons came after all that gold and riches were claimed.
To me, this is the strongest part of Matthew Restall's entire argument. Maybe Montezuma surrendered. Maybe he was captive for a very long time and no one did shit because the Spanish were just big-dicked badasses like that. Maybe Cortez was always in control of the situation despite having zero experience leading men. But while implausible and shocking things do happen, it's when they begin happening one after the other, over and over, that it becomes difficult to believe. And all of these things need to be true, or none of it makes any sense whatsoever. And frankly, it doesn't make much sense in the first place. Montezuma has to be a pussy. Cortez has to be a genius, the likes of which the world's never seen, for like exactly 2 years, and an absolute idiot forever before and after that. The Tlaxcalteca have to be totally docile and obedient to some fucking weirdos they just met and also fought in battle. It would be one thing if every account was consistently improbable in the exact same way, but they're not. The times at which certain events happened, and what happened at all, varies wildly. What was written about the Spanish New World during this period was written almost exclusively by investors. During the 235 days of supposed captivity, despite having access to writing tools and Cortez's frankly insane claim that a notary was present for the surrender, not a single letter from the Spaniards would leave the city until after it fell. In Bernal Diaz's account, Montezuma's captivity was business as usual to a suspect degree. Aztec nobility would still visit him so he could settle disputes. They all went hunting together. Montezuma still did his sacrifices. They even played a game called Totoloque. And Montezuma accused...
Oh man, they had games back then too? I'd like to play some Aztec games. Probably better than Catan.
Pedro Alvarado, a man who would later go down in history as the butcher of the Mayan people, of cheating. Hey, come on, Pedro. You know you're not keeping score correctly. I will wear your skin before this is over.
Hey folks, just one more interruption. I just want to remind you that I am also a game designer, and my first game, X Seekers of Fortune, will be coming out soon, before the end of the year, will be delivered into America. So if you want to pre-order your copy, go to xseekersoffortune.com. Down in the description. At that website, you can learn more about the game. You can see the designs. You can learn how to play. You can even schedule a demo with me so that you can know how to play the game, can get a full taste of it through Tabletop Simulator, and make your decision as to whether or not you're going to buy it. So please pick up your copy of X Seekers of Fortune, or just visit our website and see if it's something that would be up your alley. Remember, fortune favors the bold.
Hernan Cortez, defying of Diego Velázquez, the Cuban governor who authorized his expedition, waged a war of conquest. In order to morally justify this illegal war, Cortez would use the brutal ritual of human sacrifice and the accounts of Aztec enemies. Then, in order to legally justify his war, he invented a surrender and a captivity, according to the traditional narrative.
Like, something that I was sort of scratching the surface on just a moment ago is both like a grim... Yeah, like something I'm taking from this that will be grim, but also uplifting. Not uplifting, like reassuring, is the fact that they had to legally justify this war. There was a law that it wasn't just like the Spanish arrived at the New World and thus there was no laws and they just got to conquest and not have to answer to anybody. There was people they had to answer to. Now, granted, everybody was in conspiracy to sort of have it, justify it just enough to like work out. But there was this PR aspect to it. I'm not sure what that says. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it is somewhat reassuring, I guess. I don't know. It feels dark saying that. I don't know. This might make me rethink some things about like how we go about justifying. But ultimately, like my ultimate belief, and I think Matt Chrisman said this on Chapo Trap House, which I still very much respect the minds and the thoughts that went on there. Maybe not so much Felix, but definitely Matt. But ultimately, you act and then you justify your actions. It's not the other. Rarely is it the other way around. It's like you do what you need to do to succeed, and then you kind of write the narrative afterwards. To yourself or to your entire people.
At this point, a Velasquez loyalist by the name of Narvaez arrives in Mexico with a force 3 times the size of Cortez's expedition, but at the Battle of Cholula, he would be crushed by Cortez in a stunning sneak attack.
What?
Oh yeah, and Cortez had a metric shitload of Tlaxcalteca with him. It should be noted here that despite Cortez claiming to be in control of the Aztec Empire, no Aztec warriors would fight on his side, but some would be on Narvaez's side. Regardless, Narvaez was wildly outnumbered, and some bad luck would result in him taking an arrow to the eye in the beginning of the battle. So, you want to continue to try and arrest me for 0 material gain, or do you want to go with me to the seat of the Aztec Empire and steal all their shit? I'll consider the offer. But while Cortez and Narvaez were having their little cat fight, aforementioned butcher of men and cheater of monopoly, Pedro Alvarado, had attacked the Aztec during a festival, causing the simmering tensions in the city to boil over. And upon the return of Cortez and his men, they would all end up being besieged in the palace with Montezuma. And so Montezuma was sent out onto the roof to attempt to get his subjects under control. And that brings us to the Death Knot. There on the roof, Montezuma implored his people to lay down their arms, but
Barely was the speech finished when a sudden shower of stones and darts descended. It was stated that he had reigned for 17 years and was the best king they ever had in Mexico.
So, did angry Aztec soldiers slay Montezuma? After Julius Caesar defeated Pompey the Great and the Roman Senate in the Battle of Pharsalus, Pompey would escape to Egypt, as it was ruled by the Ptolemaic family, his old allies. But the Egyptian royal family would treacherously slay Pompey and gift his severed head to Caesar so as to curry favor with him upon his arrival. But Caesar was not pleased by this gruesome display. Pompey had been married to Caesar's daughter. He'd been a war hero when Caesar was a young man, and the two had worked together as adults for years. Did Julius Caesar, in this moment, tangle with the cost of ambition? Could it be that the man always portrayed as in control, the man who cast the die and crossed the Rubicon, who had played the game better than anyone had ever played it before, had not truly understood what happens when someone loses? A usually generous man to his former enemies, it is fair to assume Caesar planned to spare Pompey. Had Julius Caesar never considered the possibility that Pompey the Great, his friend, his ally, his inspiration, could lose? We will never know what Caesar thought at this moment where his ambition killed his friend, but according to Plutarch, he wept. Hernan Cortez wept upon seeing Montezuma's remains, as did many conquistadors. They'd spent the better part of a year with the man, hunting, playing, talking. Could it be that Cortez...
Oh, come on, none of that happened.
Cortez's right-hand man was named Sandoval.
I do think it's interesting that we see the world, and it's opening up. That's like the apparatus of, or the aperture of your perspective is opens with media, like, you know, dispersal of visual media and news media and things like that. I think the story of humanity is like often about like each individual person, how broad a perspective they can have, instead of being just like in their own head. But the idea of, like, especially back then, in Roman, you know, the Roman times and Caesar's times, just, how should I say, you only, I don't know, like, it's hard to trust a loser, like a loser's perspective on life, and it's hard to trust a winner's perspective on life. If somebody is just only lost and somebody's just only won, you have like a very skewed perspective on like what life is. I also think of it, okay, but let me tell you, like, my health inspector analogy. A health inspector for the city comes into a restaurant, you know, and all they see are people who are nervous or upset you know, and they think, I can only imagine that they perceive the world as being just people who are nervous and upset. You know, they think like they obviously in the back of their minds are like deep down inside, they have to understand that they have an effect and a power over people, but it doesn't change the fact that all they see are like weirdos who are, you know, and like they just go around all day seeing people who are not normal. And so how are you supposed to know what normal is if all you do, your presence has an aura that causes everything to not be normal? And that's like one version of what Caesar was, because Caesar was essentially a winner of history until he lost big. Oh God, did he lose? But up until then, he was a winner of history. I mean, he still won history. He affected history. Our calendar is essentially his creation, or at the very least, he signed off on it. He put the people in power to make the lunar, whatever we want to call it, the Gregorian calendar, what it is today, and get it set up forever. So I mean, he won. He died. He was killed for it, you know, or for other things. But yeah, I mean, like his perspective, like his like the world that he saw was so much different than somebody who just constantly, you know, got lopped on the head time and time again every time they had an idea. I know that there's probably something there. I could probably refine what I just said to be a better video, but it's something I often think about, is just like how your perception of the world is dictated by how the feedback you get from other people and the rest of the world, whether it be like emotional feedback from people that you interact with, or physical feedback from like the physics of the things, you know, the reaction to the things that you do. And that could really change, you know, your disposition at a core level.
And he was always trusted with the most sensitive assignments. Sandoval would spend much of the war in charge of the colony of Villarica, running the colony in Cortez's absence, and years later would travel with Cortez to Spain. But upon the road, Sandoval fell deathly ill.
Oh no.
After all we've been through. It seems like a cruel joke for a little fever to kill me. No, don't talk like that. We survived a war against two empires at once. This fever will pass in no time. We were young men then, filled with the fire of ambition. But now I'm so tired. Have we been men of God, Cortez? The swords of Christ? As the darkness calls me, it whispers a terrible truth. That our swords swung for gold and glory, and never for God. Cortez?
Oh, God.
Sandoval would be robbed by an innkeeper and die penniless and alone after Cortez abandoned him on the road. Cortez did not cry, and Montezuma almost certainly did not get killed by his subjects. But then why lie about that? The Spanish had previously burned native rulers alive. The fucking Incan emperor would end up being choked to death. They probably high-fived each other after, so why lie about Montezuma? He surrendered without resistance. He allowed himself to be captive for 6 months and was a steadfast ally of the Spanish. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Montezuma did not die from the wounds inflicted on him by his subjects while he spoke to them on the roof, because he died on November 8th, 1519, as that was the day that Montezuma, the cannibal king, the great speaker, the heir to an empire, and the coward that gave it up, died and was replaced by a murky cloud of politics. Did Montezuma surrender on sight, get taken hostage by the Spanish for 6 months, and then die of his wounds from his own people? Did he die in the most beautiful and blameless way possible for the Spanish? Or, after the Spanish were honored guests,
there's almost like the Spanish here, like, you know, with the history's 20 or hindsight's 2020, of course. It's like they almost like oversold the situation, not thinking about like the nuances of what I like to call second tier thinking. I have a better word for it. It's not coming to me right now. But basically, a good, it's like the idea of the chess player. It's like a good chess player is thinking moves ahead. So they, if if a good chess player was coming up with a story, they would be, probably adding nuances. They wouldn't be making it so pristine for Spain. And maybe Spain needed it to be so pristine for some reason, because like maybe the leader of Spain was not a second order thinker. My good friend and creative partner who I made X Seekers of Fortune with, I think of him as second order thinker, because he's already thinking about like, what is somebody going to think about this, and then I'm going to react to what I think they're thinking about this. So it seems to me like with how clean the Spanish made it, that like they weren't thinking about the history that was going to come to examine them. They were just thinking about like what's going to make it seem okay for, I don't know, the subjects, the other rulers of Europe, who I'm not sure who they were trying to impress, honestly. I don't know why there was so much politics of keeping this clean, all things considered. So I got to learn more about that, but it doesn't seem like they did as good of a job as they could have if they had considered how much scrutiny they would be under for the long view of history. They would have probably let their hands get a little dirty in this whole situation.
And friends of Montezuma for nearly a year did Cortez, now strengthened with a much larger force by Narvaez's surrender and eager to maintain their loyalty with gold, take Montezuma captive, causing the city to rise against him. And upon being besieged in the palace, did the Spaniards cut down Montezuma in cold blood, because what use was he, after all, if he could not control his people? The Spanish would escape the city in the night now known as the Noche Triste. The cost of this retreat would be devastating. The 1,300 soldiers Cortez got from Narvaez had almost all drowned in the lake, their pockets weighed down with gold. One of these bars has even been recovered in a recent archaeological dig. 1,300 men entered Tenochtitlan after Narvaez's defeat, and 400 left. The Spanish would retreat to...
A third? Roughly a third? Less than a third. Roughly a third. That is bad numbers. Like, I do not want to go into a field with two other guys and have one of us be pointed at and said, you'd survive. Oh, whoops.
To Tlaxcalan, gather fresh troops, and return to lay siege to the great city. A city now suffering from a debilitating smallpox plague, as well as a power struggle. The Aztec ruled their empire in just about the most hands-off way an empire could be ruled. As long as tribute was delivered as agreed upon, the many city-states in their territory, and we should use that term lightly, would govern themselves as they had prior to their defeat. With the death of Montezuma, a succession crisis occurred. The previous regional power of Mesoamerica, those that had preceded the Aztec, the city of Azcapotzalco, had lost their power during a succession crisis of their own, at which point they were defeated by the Aztec. And as with Azcapotzalco's fall from power, the writing was on the wall. Steel and germs absolutely played a significant part in the fall of the Aztec.
Yes. Okay. So, like I said, this is what I was expecting to be the top two contenders for the fall of the Aztecs, but what's the other fall? The internal politics, the house of cards that their own culture was built upon, that the Aztecs just kind of came in or not the Aztecs, the Spanish came in and grabbed just a handful of the cards and pulled it away, and then like watched everything else crumble. What's it going to be?
As did resentment towards their rule. But these were only the obsidian daggers that opened the chest. That which pulled the heart out was their system of government. The Aztec brought cities under their influence in many ways. War, of course, but also diplomacy, favors, and just simple intimidation. But what fear could a dying city project? What favors were there to earn from a dead man? What benefits were there to siding with a lost cause when you could instead join the Spanish and Tlaxcalteca and curry favor with what looked to be the new regional power? Even their once firm allies of Texcoco, who had even helped defeat Azcapotzalco, turned to the Spanish side. There were hundreds of Spaniards at the fall of Tenochtitlan, and tens of thousands of Native American allies. The Aztec had dominated the region for 100 years, but that domination was built on reputation, a reputation that died with Montezuma. Among the conquistador deaths during the Noche Triste was a man named Botello the Astrologer. When the conquistadors went through his belongings, I know you're shocked. The conquistadors did not respect others' personal property. It's crazy. Diaz notes that Botello had a journal filled with the names of conquistadors and their fates according to the stars.
Also in the box was an object 4 inches long and made of leather in the shape of a man's genitals.
Yeah.
The resemblance was remarkable.
I
mean, come on, guys. Come on, guys. Like since the dawn of man, since we could think, could perceive, we've just been wanting to either, get pleasure from a phallus or to create a phallus to give pleasure to others. Isn't that what humanity is ultimately about? Especially if your phallus cannot deliver the pleasure. I wouldn't know about that personally. Doing pretty well myself, but that's what it all comes down to. Either you deliver with what you naturally have, or you create something to deliver, and that's how it goes.
This guy so fucking much. It was the work of Bernal Diaz that dragged me into this story. His work is enrapturing, hilarious, heartfelt, and thrilling, but beyond that, it's simple, offering quick answers to the many questions raised by one of the most complicated and politically divisive events in human history. This simplicity lies at the heart of its success and failure. Bernal Diaz did not know what was happening. It's hard to blame him, as neither did the Mesoamerican people, until it was too late.
Yeah.
In the last paragraph of the last page of the last book of the Florentine Codex, the now defeated leaders of Tenochtitlan brought gold to Cortez. The entire interaction went as well as you could imagine. I know you've got more, you fucking liar. Oh well, maybe some of the commoners took our gold in the chaos of war. Perhaps some poor woman hid the gold beneath her skirt, but in such case, I'm sure you'll find it. In this exchange, besides that sick burn, we see how the Aztecs saw their own defeat. Because, let me tell you, they were confused. They tried to explain to Cortez that now that he'd won, he was to return home, and the Aztec would pay tribute to the Spanish as tribute had once been paid to them. This was the way of Mesoamerican war. You defeat your enemy, burn their temple to establish dominance, then you go home and wait to receive your tribute, which will most likely come on a yearly basis. The loser, for the most part, would maintain their independence, and the winner would get luxury goods and resources until they lose the military strength required to enforce their demands. As the Spanish burned Tenochtitlan to the ground and established Mexico City, which would become their base of operations for further expeditions, it became clear that this was not what war was to the Spanish. The Spanish did not want tribute. They wanted everything, and they would not return home. They had conquered a new one and would shape it in their image. The Aztec, from their diplomatic meeting in November 1519 to the fall of Tenochtitlan, were fighting the sort of war they'd fought countless times before, a Mesoamerican power struggle, and the stakes of such a war was losing your position in the tribute system, not your independence nor your culture. The Spanish were fighting a different war, a war of conquest, a total war aimed at subjugating the region. Within the context of a war of conquest, Aztec actions looked weak, indecisive, and just generally honestly embarrassing. It is only when you take their perspective that their actions appear reasonable and measured. They did not understand that their way of life was morally abhorrent to the Spanish. They did not know they were dealing with investors and not diplomats. They did not know that this was an existential threat to their way of life. They thought it was a threat to Tenochtitlan's regional power, and they acted accordingly. The nature of Mesoamerican warfare would largely be buried, and it is only in recent years that serious attempts to understand their perspective has shed light on what occurred. While the Dutch and English would spread propaganda about the Spanish and establish a black legend around their empire, this does not compare to the black legend the Spanish formulated around the Aztec. They had total control over the narrative for nearly 100 years until such famed Nahua historians as Ixochitl and Chimalpahin would emerge near the end of the 16th century, but by that point, the eyewitnesses of the conquest were dead. And those two men were as Spanish as they were Nahua. The black legend around the Aztec, furthermore, is nonsensical. They were savage, inhuman barbarians who built a glory.
Yeah. One thing, this is where fence sitting comes into play. Like what I think fence sitting actually is like both can be true. It doesn't have to be one or the other in terms of the way the world works. The darkest and the worst and the best can be attributed to a single person. You can be, I don't know, you can just, you don't have to be a paragon of nobility or just the worst savage in the world. It's like we are, Ken Wilber talks about that in his like levels of perception, his levels of like, I don't know, like kind of like mental evolution, if you will. And it's like when you get to the peak of mental evolution, it's not like that you're some enlightened being sitting on a cloud. It's that you can be somebody who can transcend or go between, you know, like almost like you can take an elevator between all the levels of humanity. It's called integral. You're integral. This is a huge topic that I cannot get into right now here at the last 2 minutes of this entire series. But, you know, don't believe it when somebody tells you that a person is all one thing. We are many things, and the best of us are all of those things when they need it. They can go between being somebody who's driven by anger and rage and wanting to conquer, or you know, like or being somebody who's like, you know, a part of a community and tries to become a paragon or a you know, just a standout member of that community. Or they can go up to being somebody who's like enlightened and postmodern and their dissection of art. You know, they can transition between all three of those in a single day, just because they know themselves, they know the world. But yeah, never believe anybody who says these people are just completely evil. Never believe anybody who says these people are just completely good. That's not that. You know, sit on the fence. Look at it from above. See it from a bird's eye view, and then make your own decision.
A storybook city and surrendered on sight. Montezuma was an inconsistent, two-faced bastard who was totally docile and easy to control. It doesn't make sense. It's a nonsense narrative that, despite Diaz, despite Las Casas, despite Sahagún, was communicated almost totally by Hernan Cortez. Everything that has ever been written about the fall of the Aztec has to depend on his letters to some extent, despite the absolutely nonsensical narrative contained within them. Did you know Hernan Cortez studied for several years to be a lawyer? That was the last thing I learned about this whole event, and it made it all click.
Agreed. The fact that they were trying to legally justify all their actions. Yeah, of course he was a lawyer. Of course he understood that, you know, that was going to be the criteria that he was going to ultimately be judged by. That's such a lawyer brain thing to do. All right, let's get into this.
It was this understanding of the Spanish legal system that helped Cortez get away with what he did. In combination with the history, he wrote that when a guy hands you and it made it all click. It was this understanding of the Spanish legal system that helped Cortez get away with what he did. In combination...
I do have to ask though, like, and this is the thing I want to know is like, how could he not get away with what he thought? I mean, maybe I'm being the brutalist here, but it's like you're in a land, you're in a new land that is not under the purview of your systems. Like I would love to talk to somebody about this and get into in depth to get the full perspective on it. And maybe it's because Cortez came from the legal system that he thought he had to be justified within the legal system as a subject of Spain. But my thought on it is like you step into the new world, you're just at the most you're subject to the new world's legal system, and your personal legal system no longer has like a domain over you. But he obviously thought it was very important to be judged fairly by his own legal system.
With the fact that when a guy hands you an empire for free, you probably don't ask too many questions. Hernan Cortez studied to be a lawyer, and he lived like a lawyer. He did not write a history. He wrote a legal argument that holds zero water, and has for 5 centuries made this event, one of the most important events in human history, almost impossible to parse. And as he lived like a lawyer, so too would he die like a lawyer, on a pile of money and lies. And unfortunately, in these final moments of this 3-hour tangle of lawyer doublespeak, old man rambling, and censorship, I have to quote 1984. Those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. Thank you for watching.
Based. DJ Peach Cobbler came in at the end and really sold the entire shaboinga, the entire quagmire of the narrative is what I mean to say. Beautiful video series. I'm very happy that y'all have pushed me to watch it, and at this point I'm going to watch all his videos. He just released a new one just earlier today as of recording, and I'm going to have to be watching that soon enough. I'm probably going to post it sooner than I would want to. I feel like it might step on the toes of this video that we're talking about right now. But thank y'all so much for watching these videos with me, and thank you for pushing me into watching these videos in the first place. I stumbled upon DJ Peach Cobbler in my YouTube recommended videos, and it was a different kind of video for him when I first watched it, and now I've become very much a diehard fan of him, and because of your diehard fanaticism with him, and pushing me to join your cult, if you will. So please, with that in mind, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with somebody who you think is maybe a little too legalese, a little too pedantic, and remind them that all they're doing is justifying their bad actions. Please check out X Seekers of Fortune, my game that I've been developing for the past 3 years with my good friend, and enjoy yourself. Okay, just cutting in right here, the next DJ Peach Cobbler video I'm probably going to watch is the Annihilation video. Okay, that's recording. That's recording. All right. Here we go. The finale of the Aztecs, the fall of the Aztecs. Finale. Phoenicia. Feline.